I'd like to ask you a question. If you had 3 months left to live, what would you do? Now, I know that can seem a bit morbid, but I don't mean it to be. But I'd love you to consider it. You see, we can go through our life doing what we're always doing and rarely take the time out to actually think and reflect on what perhaps we should be doing, or more importantly, what will actually bring us joy. And unfortunately for some people, that moment of reflection doesn't come until it's too late. So, if you were given news today that you only had a short time left to live, what would you do? And apart from putting your affairs in order and making preparations for your end, what then? What would you spend your time doing, assuming that you had the health to actually do it? Would you look at the world differently? Would you look at life differently? Would you look at some of your relationships differently? Would you change anything about your work and what it is that you do? You see, some people don't even get the opportunity to plan or to prepare, and others don't have the health or the energy to be able to do anything differently. So right now, you might be actually in a very privileged position to be able to do something about it. So is there anything that you would change? Would you continue to do the work that you're doing? Would you remove yourself from some relationships or perhaps mend other relationships? You see, recently I've been given pause to think on some of the things I'm doing, and this podcast has been one of them. For one, I've no real idea if it makes any difference, if people are actually really listening to it or whether they find it useful at all. Now, yes, I get a number of people that reach out to me and they refer to particular episodes. And yes, I've had a number of positive reviews. But if I was to look at it from a rational perspective, it would say that there's actually no point in continuing with the podcast. But then there's an inner part of me that tells me to continue. So what I've decided to do in the short term is to take a short break. But just so that you're not left with nothing, I've gone back over all the episodes and picked the ones that people have referred to the most. Some of the highest numbers of downloads, and others have a particular message to convey. So for each week for the next month, I'll be releasing somewhat of a repeat of some of the original episodes. And that will actually give me the time and the space to discern what I should be doing with the podcast going forward. Will I continue with it? I honestly actually really don't know. It's something I just need to reflect on and just discern on. Now, sometimes it just feels like I'm in one of those Armageddon movies, all alone broadcasting to the world on a CB radio and not knowing if anybody's actually listening. Which brings me back to my suggestion for you to consider what it is that you're doing in your life. You see, in the last couple of years, there's someone that's close to me that was given that decision to make in the real sense. And so their time is limited. And now as that person gets closer to the end, it's absolutely heartbreaking. You see, the real question is, while you have the opportunity to live life, are you living life or are you just existing? So I mean it in the most positive way possible so that you might consider it for yourself. You see, I went for a walk yesterday along the coast and the weather was absolutely amazing. There were a number of people out there on their sailing boats. There were others paddleboarding and there were others just fishing. And while there were loads of people really enjoying themselves, there were a few that had their head down stuck in their mobile phone. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't about giving it to people about being in their mobile phone or being just consumed with what it is on social media. It's just an observation. I met another person during the week and he described how busy he was working for his boss, but he didn't look healthy at all. I have regular meetings with people that describe how much they dislike their jobs or the business that they're doing, and they're really, really unhappy. And when I take a look at social media, which isn't that often, thank God, I'm amazed at how bitter some people are towards others, whether it be when they're having discussions about whether to be vaccinated or not to be vaccinated, whether to be about one political party or another political party, or whether it's being a cyclist versus a motorist. The list goes on. And while all those conversations or debates can be healthy, there are times when you wonder if people can actually be kind to each other. I mean, genuinely kind to each other. And in some respects, it's the law of duality playing out all the time. But when it comes to your own life, what are you tolerating? Are you enjoying your life? Are you living your life? And I mean living it fully. Or do you find yourself numb to life or even numbing yourself with work or some other distraction? I was reminded of a story in our family recently. Now, I've heard the story many times before, but this time it was a little bit more poignant. And the story goes, while As we were a family and we were young and we went on holiday in the west of Ireland, and we visited a place called the Cliffs of Moher. I was about 5 or 6 years old at the time. Now, if you don't know the Cliffs of Moher, it's a spectacular place. The cliffs run about 14 kilometres and their height runs from between 120 metres to 240 metres, and the scenery is really, really beautiful. Well, the story goes that on the day that we were visiting the cliffs, my family lost me for a short time. And when they eventually found me, there I was, perched on the edge of the cliff. And my family were so terrified that my dad had to crawl on his stomach to reach me so as to pull me back from the edge. Now, my family didn't tell me what happened afterwards, but I'm sure I got a clatter across the head when I got back off to safe ground from my dad. Now, I don't know how true the story is, because after all, I was only 5 or 6 at the time. But the story being told recently triggered another memory for me. It was the time I was doing a parachute jump. And that was when I was sitting on the edge of a plane with my legs dangling at the door, getting ready to jump to 10,000 feet that I'd be flown up to. And looking out of the plane at the ground below, I can only imagine that I had the same exhilaration when I was sitting on the edge of the Cliffs of Moher all those many years ago. There, sitting on the edge, looking at the amazing view, not a fear in the world, but the sheer excitement and anticipation of it all. We've all heard reference when reading a book or watching a movie and making a comment being that it was so exciting that I was on the edge of my seat. When it comes to my life now, it might not have the same excitement as taking a parachute jump or sitting on the edge of a cliff, but there definitely is excitement there. In my first book, Evolve, I recall the conversation that I had with a friend of mine many, many years ago, and the question to her was, when I look at you, you never stop, you're always on the go, and it's like as if you suck every ounce out of life. And her response to me was, Paul, why wouldn't you? And honestly, there's no better way or more succinct way in putting it. So are you sucking every ounce out of life? And even if you're doing really good at the moment and you'd score yourself a 5 or a 6 out of 10, what would it take to score yourself a 10? What would you need to change? What would you do differently? And if you did change, what difference would it make for you and the life that you want to live? Now, you've probably seen the movie A Christmas Carol from the book by Charles Dickens. And if you have, you'll remember that Scrooge was visited by 3 ghosts. The ghost of Christmas past, the Christmas present, and Christmas future. Now, there have been many such movies, but the message is the same. And the whole point is to look at your life up until now and to see what was the impact you've made. And to see your life in the future and to see what the impact will be if you continue doing what you're currently doing. And then to come back and see what you'd like to change at this present moment in time. So maybe it would be good to take some time out to determine if there's anything that you would like to change in your life for the better. Now, unfortunately for Scrooge, he thought his life was perfect and he was quite happy with his life. That was before he was visited by the ghosts. And for many people that's the same because they know no different. That is until the truck comes along. So will you? Will you take the time out to reflect and determine what it is that you might want to change in your life so that you get to live your life fully? And if you do so, will you write a manifesto? An intention of what you want to change and in that way commit to doing it instead of going back to the ways you've always done things. Because that's what I intend doing over the next month. To spend the time and reflect more and to see what I'd like to do differently or to prioritise more. After all, if we only have one life, we should make it count, right? So until next time, I wish you every success.